Contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. In times of spiritual and moral chaos, it can be hard to discern truth from error and to apply it to all of life. God's word is not silent, and we don't have to be either. This is Once for All Delivered with Caleb Castro and Andrew Smith.
Good evening, OFAD lads and lasses. Welcome to Once for All Delivered, a show that exists.
Yes, hello, OFAD lads and lasses. Welcome to Once for All Delivered, a show that exists.
I just said that.
It is absolutely.
We were better when the AI was writing our intros, and we were terrible when the AI was writing our intro. Oh, I'm not an AI. People used to make fun of me. They used to call me Android.
I'm sorry.
I should not have told you that. I should not have told anyone that.
I should not have said that. That was pretty clever, though.
Yeah, so anyway. OFAD. I am Andrew Smith.
And I am Caleb Castro. Well, since you said that, and to segue into our general topic before segueing into our pre-show topic, to segue to our actual topic, you get all that? Our Caleb Castro, that was fun growing up because in California, in San Francisco, there is a particular demographic that is, associated with the LGBT crowd. And that demographic lives in a district called the Castro district. So, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, now what does that have to do with, what we might be doing here on this first day of June in the year of our Lord 2023?
We're going to be talking about sin.
Are we now?
Yeah.
But we already did that. We did sin and misery generally a few weeks ago, so...
We're going to be speaking about particular sin, known as the sin of pride, and its association with a certain month that people associate with.
A certain month.
A certain explicitly LGBTQ Pride Month. Yes.
Wow, you put the Q on. I still refuse to go beyond like 2012, so I just do LGBT, and that's all the letters I'm using.
Oh no, I like adding the queer part, the Q. It's actually I like adding all of them because it's kind of like, how what they say, like the alphabet soup. It's just kind of like, let's see what else we can do here.
Yeah.
Well, there's, it's really not a representative label though, LGBTQIA++, because isn't there allegedly some 70 something genders?
Yeah, but then there's also, I've seen some where they add like 2S in there for two spirits, which I mean, if we're talking about like demonic stuff, since we don't have a planned normal Satanism talk like we usually do in this episode, we'll at least get a little bit of it in right here.
Au contraire, I'm kidding.
Come on, you can't just spring uncontrolled Satanism on me.
I can't just spring Satanism on you.
Okay, so before we get into our main topic, just one announcement.
Our pre-topic.
I did an interview, and I mentioned a while ago that I would be doing this. I did an interview with Aldo Leon on the Kingdom Polemics podcast talking about the theology of Meredith Kline and issues involved there. It's called Kline versus the Confessions. It's on YouTube. It's on podcasts under Kingdom Polemics. About an hour and a half long, because we can't do anything now that's less than an hour and a half long. But I think it'd be worth your time. It's a good discussion, kind of bringing together some of the theological issues and some of the theological roots of a lot of the issues that we look at and issues in our world and issues in the church. So, again, Kingdom Polemics.
Probably not controversial at all.
Yeah, it's already stirred up a little bit of things, but yeah, no, it's how the sausage gets made, I guess. Anyway, now our main topic.
Sorry, I've never heard the phrase. That's how the sausage gets made.
Really?
Maybe
You never heard that?
That
No.
should be that could be our tagline.
How the sausage gets made.
Yeah. Well, we can incorporate it in there somewhere. Anyways, you're going to mention a topic.
Yeah, so our main topic is it is the first day of Pride Month, so we're going to talk about Pride. We already said that. I don't know why we're saying it again.
Well, how about why besides just June 1st, why is this something to be spoken about? Does Scripture say anything about this?
Why, yes, it does. It says so in Romans chapter 1. Of course, that would require me to have my Bible up, and
I have it if you want me to read it.
Why don't you read it?
All right. Well, from Romans chapter 1, which we have never, ever, ever before referenced in any of our shows. So, Romans 1 from verse 18 onwards. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Is there music for you?
Waiting for my Logos startup sound to clear. Continue.
You just interrupted the word of the Lord.
Thing is, nobody else can hear it, so it's just you. They're going to think you're crazy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
I interrupted the reading of the word of the Lord. Okay, I'm going to start that again. Romans 1:8 from verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, ruthless, and heartless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them.
All right.
Well, let's end the show right there.
I mean, really, we could, because this text just so perfectly describes everything we're going to talk about. This text is our world. This is our culture. We see this unfolding in real time every day. And especially in this annual June celebration of Pride Month, you just see it all thrown out on full display, all these sins and where they come from and where they go. Cotton Eye Joe. Ooh, boy, buckle up. It's going to be a long night. Yeah, so with that as our starting off point biblically, we're going to walk through some developments, what's been going on in the days leading up to the start of Pride Month, and even just today, things as it's kicked off, how this Pride Month has been maybe in some ways different from previous installments, and yet how we still see the issues, how we still see the corruption in our culture, how we see some compromise in some even surprising and difficult places, and then we'll offer some theological and practical comments, and that's basically the path we're going to take tonight, as much as we ever take a path on this show.
One fast note on that, actually, just one single note there from Romans 1. Do you like how that talks about associates this unrighteousness of men and ungodliness with by pointing out that such men that walk in unrighteousness claim to be wise,
Mm-hmm.
but really they are fools. And this is the nature of pride itself, and broadly speaking, just the sin of pride. But in this case, this boasting in self-exaltation of sin. This is the nature of the wisdom of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, sorry, just wanted to add that in there because it's I don't know, I just think that's a beautiful, beautiful in one sense that Paul
Very
even throws it.
astute.
Well, Paul throws a doxology in the midst of it, you know.
Yeah.
But anyways, so here like you said, starting on developments. What's that? The first development there.
Well, this is something we talked about a few weeks ago when we did our stream on the law of God and the transgender crisis. We talked about Dylan Mulvaney and his sponsorship by Bud Light and the backlash and the controversy surrounding that. Well, you would think usually the way these boycotts go, that was a few weeks ago, by now this would be over. It is not over by any stretch. It's been ongoing. It's as bad as it's ever been. Bud Light sales are still down. If you're watching on the video, we have slides now because we're fancy. You can see things, but even if not, just take our word for it. Down nearly 30% over the same week last year. Bud Light sales still are. About a month into this controversy over Dylan Mulvaney, there's been various attempts made to walk this back, various attempts to offer non-apology apologies. Now, there's various reasons why you won't get a real unqualified apology from AB InBev, the parent company of Anheuser-Busch, which makes Bud Light. For one, they're owned by AB InBev, which is a Belgian company, very much a liberal company, a globalist company, and very much on board with the LGBT movement and things like it. So they're never going to completely sell out. And in fact, even just in the last few days, it's come out, in case you thought maybe that they had learned their lesson, that the boycott was really working. They announced that they were giving $200,000 to the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, an organization, a nonprofit, specifically to help LGBT owned and operated businesses.
Oh wait, not just that. That's it. It's even better. They got to hit the intersection card because they're giving it to this LGBT Chamber of Commerce to support LGBT business owners of color. So you have to check the boxes there. So
right. Yeah, you got to go. You got to dig deeper, even. Yeah, because that's intersectionality and the worldview surrounding it. We've talked about it before. The more of those boxes you check, the better. But yeah, so $200,000, which is, I mean, a small drop in a bucket for a company of this size, even as they're reeling from this boycott. But what it is they're basically caught between the rock and the hard place. They've alienated a lot of their core customer base, which is generally blue-collar, working-class, conservative Americans. But then also now they have seemingly, at least in the eyes of the LGBT community, deserted and abandoned them. So everybody's mad at Bud Light, and Bud Light's, they're doing their best version they can of crisis communication and damage control. But it does all just ring as very hollow and disingenuous, because really, I mean, what else can it be?
And the rest of all these that we are going to be bringing up, they're all that exact same thing, just to put it out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all a cash grab, and everyone knows it, even the LGBT communities.
Yeah. If you're expecting this to be a real encouraging and hopeful stream and make you feel good about things, I'm sorry to say it's not going to be that show. This is going to be a lot of gloom and doom. But I think it's important to see it and important for us to think as Christians how we can deal with stuff like this.
Well, now the this one here on a little bit more of a recent boycott. Target. Everybody's probably hearing about this one, and I think the media. I don't know the media portrayals or the different ways this issue has been surfacing and you know and evaluated has been actually pretty interesting. So you had Target there. Um, Now, Target had basically, I believe we mentioned this at the end of our last live stream, just briefly, that Target had partnered with, for one thing, a Satanist fashion designer who was putting out Satan themed pride clothing. Satan uses pronouns as one, that kind of stuff. Trying to be, edgy. Um, but Target, had also been putting out was looking at putting out these transgender tuck friendly swimwear. That's their phrase, not ours. Um,
If you don't know, you don't want to
don't
know.
ask. Yeah, if you have to ask, you don't want to know. It's the yeah. So I mean, Target has been putting out like LGBT stuff on Pride Month for a while now. Andrew mentioned already it's been about 7 years or so, 6.5 years since he had started boycotting Target when they were allowing transgenders into, whatever restrooms. They've already have a history of this, but this most recent matter, following on the heels of this Budweiser boycott, this Anheuser-Busch boycott, there's started to be some serious backlash against Target, and that they've pulled, they started pulling some of these Pride merchandise due to certain threats, and some even putting them in the back of the store, just in the corner.
Yeah, which actually we should talk about the threats because initially when they started pulling this merchandise, including they pulled the line by that Satanist designer, and the Satanist designer now regrets ever getting involved with this. But anyway, so yeah, what initially happened is Target started pulling this merchandise out of some of their stores, and they were saying that there were threats by anti-LGBT customers that were coming into their stores and harassing and threatening employees. Um, when I first heard this, I thought that sounds like something that did not happen. In fact,
Babylon Bee.
I tweeted one of my favorite video memes, which is the compilation of Jonathan Frakes from Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, and all the different ways he said that something was fiction. When they were talking about that it was these right-wing threats that were caused this merchandise to be pulled, I just didn't see why it happened. And then some journalists, because apparently there are journalists who will still actually go out and try to verify stuff like this, actually went and looked and decided, no, this probably didn't actually happen. They debunked a lot of the talk of the threats from these right-wing anti-LGBT people. So it seems like it's very possible that the talk of threats was just to try to have an excuse. Because the thing is, Target does this, they pull this merchandise, then they face the backlash from the LGBT community. And that provoked, and again, these are also dubious claims. I take all of these with a few bags of salt. But so there's been these reports now from various Target stores of bomb threats. And these bomb threats are from people claiming to be part of the LGBT community who feel betrayed and abandoned. And so, as with Bud Light before, Target's caught between the rock and the hard place as to which constituency they're going to alienate the most.
When I'm finding, as I was looking into that as well with the alleged bomb threats, which they're claiming it was about 9 threats claimed from Utah and Ohio stores and elsewhere. But now I'm starting to see several leftist groups, including a group of pretty closely befriended with Target, claiming that it was right-wing groups that started the bomb threat hoax to make the LGBT community look bad. So obviously, but and this is, as I mentioned, this is the kind of the interesting part of like also hearing the story from the left, like how they're interpreting all of this. Like, uh, just real quick here before we move on from Target. I see one news media put out an article saying that, well, here's their loss of capital, which is actually now 14 billion as of today. Um, their loss of capital has nothing to do with the boycott. One person or one journalist says, the COVID boom is over. Its valuation is just readjusting to the standard sales performance before 2020. Perhaps there's a tiny grain of truth, with the popularity of Amazon, especially where you can find pretty comparable lower price stuff. But I'll come back to that in a second. Another story that the left is saying are that consumers are just cutting back on spending as a whole because of the weakening economy and inflation and so on, blah, blah, blah. So they don't want to just go and spend on excessive stuff. And that argument should also sound familiar because that's the same kind of stuff that these are the same kind of excuses that Disney puts out, like trying to make these excuses for, say, those 3 movies that all tanked last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, people just aren't going to the movies as much. Oh, they underperform because there's a bunch of other, recognizable franchises or blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera. But 2 weeks ago, just before the boycott started, CNBC and other media outlets reported that Target was topping its earning expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, despite as people, consumers are watching their spending, they were performing very well. So it's now there's kind of a trying to tread back those statements. Um,
Right.
so it's you have to watch the how they excuse it, how they make these excuses because they keep recurring.
And this is an important thing to think about too, as we are Christians and we're looking at the world around us and the culture and how we engage with this. We have to be very careful and pay a lot of attention to how the media frames and reports on things, because the media just a lot of times they don't tell the truth. They're not interested in telling the truth. They're interested in pushing their particular agendas and angles, and you see that in times like this. Basically, uh, it's essentially verboten for mainstream media to attribute any bad consequence to anything that their preferred groups, so LGBT and the various other intersectional groups. Basically, yeah, nothing bad can be attributed to those groups. There always has to be an alternative explanation, and that's exactly what you see happening here. But while we're looking at the retail sector, we've got another one of those. Kohl's. So you're very quickly running out of places where you can buy clothing. If J.C. Penney does it, then I'm done. I've got nowhere else I can go. I just have to go. I don't know. Start making
Time to
my
start
own.
making your own.
Yeah. So Kohl's is a fascinating case. There were some photos that emerged, and I don't have them yet on this slide if you're watching on the video, but they'll actually come up again later, and you will get to see them. But they actually had some pride-themed merchandise, particularly for babies. They had onesies for babies that had the rainbows and the different kinds of people represented on them of the LGBT community. And this has led to what seems to be a boycott of Kohl's also. At least the last time I looked, they'd lost about 5% of their stock value and were going to continue to lose more. There's really starting to be some pushback and some galvanizing against this stuff.
There's
Um,
actually and there's even a little bit more with this Kohl's thing. So I mean, it's one thing, they're putting out these baby onesies and there are things like, also I love my mommies, I love my daddies. I mean, so it's not just like a rainbow on a shirt. It's like, full blown, like here it's coming out. But some of the but they have, if you go onto their website, they actually have a pride page. On that pride page, there you'll see an image that says, love is our favorite color, and then it has the following statement: we are committed to supporting the voices of the LGBT alphabet community and celebrating the joy that comes from living authentically, not just this month, but all year long. And if you click on kind of some of their partners and sponsors, uh, one of them is called the Fluid Project, spelled PHLUID, the Fluid Project, an LGBT owned, quote, gender free fashion brand who raises money for LGBT initiatives like the LA LGBT Center that was connected with a recent certain Dodgers baseball team Pride drag event, which if we had time, that one would have been an interesting one to just go into all on its own. But anyway, so they give to this. They're partnered with the Fluid Project, and it seems to be carrying some of their products. But the Fluid Project also goes and donates its money, oftentimes, towards these kind of initiatives. But then Kohl's just put forward $100,000 to something called the Trevor Project. They've been giving donations to it since 2019 for a total of about $360,000. Again, doesn't sound like a lot, but here's what they do. The Trevor Project, their mission is to present research to show a purported link between religion and religious beliefs and high suicide rates among LGBT people. So religious people and mean religious ideologies are responsible for the LGBT deaths.
In other words, overt anti-Christian propaganda.
And actually, funny you go there. The left's reaction with the Kohl's boycott. I was reading a headline for One News, a summary actually for what this one article from a news site. It says dozens of LGBT blah 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 advocacy groups said that the boycott calls against businesses were blatantly organized by extremist groups. And what kind of extremist groups do you think that they were calling out? Evangelicals.
Us.
So so now just any kind of opposition is extremism or organized by extremists, rather than just a bunch of people that are totally sick of the woke agendas being pushed.
Yeah.
Anyways, go on.
Yeah, so, retail. But now we've got one, and, I mean, this one's probably going to hurt our listeners a bit, because this is how these things go. Chick-fil-A. This is the oft-allegedly Christian restaurant company based out of Georgia that makes chicken sandwiches and chicken sandwich accessories. They just, so they just hired a chief of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, this is another situation where it might be important to talk about the framing of stories in media. Anytime you hear diversity, equity, and inclusion, almost without fail, what they're talking about intersectionality, they're talking about critical theory, this confluence of oppressor and oppressed classes and seeing the world this way. And so much of corporate America, pretty much all of corporate America has dove into this, including now evangelicals' favorite chicken sandwich place, Chick-fil-A. And this has led to calls for boycotts. This happened just like yesterday, so hard to tell if anything's really going to happen here, but just another example of where this is going. And in fact, they had a statement on their website making very clear that they would have no discrimination on all the things they don't discriminate on, but including sexual orientation and gender identity and things of that sort.
Yeah, it's if I remember right, a lot of the whatever the guy's title is, diversion and blah blah blah, blah equality, inclusive, whatever they call it.
You could also just call it DIE.
The
D
DIE.
DIE, because you might get
DEI.
closer then to what's going on.
The DEI alphabet. So that guy, yeah, I was seeing things of like, focuses on, um, yeah, basically on, uh, trying to, pardon me, I'm trying to think how to say this. The Black Lives Matter. Basically, he's doing a kind of a soft push on endorsement of Black Lives Matter and anti-racism kind of stuff. Women's rights. But yeah, that those okay, those point those that kind of stuff's kind of like old news. But yeah, it's the policies. It's actually a hiring discrimination policy on hiring. That one's pretty sad. Um, this may be an instance, though, I think, too, on picking a battle and seeing where it goes from here. So far,
Yeah.
it's
Because really, I mean, there is some truth to the line. You can't boycott everybody. You
well,
can't.
and that's
You have.
actually sorry.
Hmm?
Well, I was gonna say real quick with that's exactly it. Where we are kind of you kind of run out of stuff of what to do. Like if you're boycotting Target, you go to Walmart. Walmart's generally seen as conservative, but I mean, Walmart has a lot of Pride products in most of its locations, especially in more metropolitan areas. They try to generally cater each store to its demographic. But I mean, yeah, they have they've even put out statements just recently and affirming that they uh, in response to this Target stuff that they're looking to put in safeguards and security measures um, for their staff if there's any backlash for carrying the Pride products that they do. So
Yeah.
so you know. Mhm.
Yeah. They're less overt about it, but it's still there. Um, so all of this to say, um, yeah, a lot of these boycotts, they do seem some of them to be having some impact. They do at least have now companies thinking and being a little more cautious about these kind of things. I've just noticed today, because today is June 1st, the first day of Pride Month. I've been looking on social media and things like that. It seems like in general that corporations, because, like last year, everybody, it seemed, was like changing their logos to, rainbow
Mhm.
logos and things like that. This year, as far as private businesses and corporations, the response seems to be a lot more muted. I think people are seeing what's happening to Bud Light, they're seeing what's happening to Target, and they're seeing these talks of other things, and they're realizing it's just a little too poisonous to wade into these waters right now. That said, um, there's a lot of organizations that are still in with both feet. For one thing, government agencies. I saw several of those. Just a few that came to mind. The the FBI, most federal agencies. Because the Democrat president is in office, they're all gonna change their logos and stuff. Nonprofits and non-governmental organizations, they're going to do this stuff still anyway because they rely on a donor base that's already sold out to this kind of stuff. They don't have to actually sell products to a wide section of the populace. So you see these nonprofits and NGOs. And just one example, a rather disturbing example that I saw today, Little League, as in Little League baseball and softball. Um, they changed their logo to a rainbow logo, and they posted a tweet saying, "We take pride in respecting individual differences and perspectives as an intentional part of our program." And then the picture is here. Everyone is included and plays the same game. And then there's a Little League logo based off of the LGBT pride flag. Now, notably, it has the blue, pink, and white stripes at the bottom, so including the trans pride part of the flag. So um, but remember, they're not targeting kids and they're not trying to trans kids. Nobody's doing that. That never happens.
That's right. Why are you conservatives so obsessed with the kids? You guys are crazy pedophiles, apparently.
Yeah.
That's been said once or twice.
Yeah. So, all of this to say, looking at the business issues and business responses and all of that, There does seem to be some effect and some impact that can be had by Christians making more careful choices about where to spend their money. And in fact, I think we're kind of at a situation now in this country. You know, a lot of people think the way you change this thing is through politics, and that may not be such a good idea for things that we're going to get into here shortly. But it seems that actually making more careful choices about where and how to spend your money could be a greater force for change, at least in the short term, than things like your voting and your political support. I mean, you see what's happened to Target and Bud Light, and now other companies are seeing that, and they're like, we don't want that. So they're kind of backing away a little. They're a little more careful about jumping into this with both feet.
And one thing is also actually going a little bit in connection to what you're saying with Little League. I mean, it's one thing with it's one thing with consumers and retail, but it can be a little hard, I think, for people in trying to, you know, for them having to choose. Well, okay, what about the sports realm now? That's I think that does. I mentioned just a certain incident with the LA Dodgers from the other week of depictions of complete ridicule of Catholics and blah 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 blah. And in connection also of religion in general. People are calling, to boycott Dodgers, but how many conservatives really are going to give up their baseball games?
Yeah, it would seem like the ones that would probably already have.
Yeah, because this stuff's kind of already been occurring now for a couple of years, even just with the Black Lives Matter stuff. But yeah, it's kind of a how worth it is the luxury of Major League Baseball for you here. Yeah, I mean, and it's becoming more and more widespread. But so it's hitting, the point being it's hitting multiple spheres. You're already seeing it in obviously in economics, business economics, and we just mentioned, say entertainment and in sports. We don't even have to touch the film industry. But what about the political realm, or by extension, that kind of conservative realm?
Yeah, because a lot of people, when they hear about these issues, their first instinct is, well, we'll just get the right people in office and we'll pass some laws and make some policies, and it'll all be better again. We can all go back to the way things used to be. Well, got bad news for you, friends. Oh, look, it's the guy who had a very realistic shot of being our president in 2016, ran a competitive second place run to Donald Trump, Ted Cruz. And what did Ted Cruz do that got him onto the Once for All Delivered podcast? He tweeted some stuff out the other day regarding the law that recently passed in Uganda. Now, if you haven't been following, Uganda just passed a law criminalizing homosexuality just about every way they can, even from promoting it on up to what were called aggravated homosexuality, which is acts of, pedophilia, pedophilia and rape and things of the sort, the penalties for that go as high as the death penalty. Other forms carry lesser penalties, but essentially criminalizing and attaching steep criminal penalties to any and all homosexual acts and even homosexual promotion. So very much an anti-American bill, and it has provoked the usual outrage from the American left. But here's Ted Cruz, major figure on the American right, and he says, this Uganda law is horrific and wrong. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or imposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, which again, remember, we're talking things like rape of children and the disabled, is grotesque and an abomination. All civilized nations should join together in condemning this human rights abuse, hashtag LGBTQ. And there he quotes a headline from the New York Times about this law. Later on, he was.
Wait. I want just restate that for a second. That last little bit of the tweet. What did he hashtag?
LGBTQ.
So just take note of that. That's something. Also, I had to
Yeah,
laugh. I was laughing a little bit when he said, "What did he do to get him on the Once for All Delivered podcast?" I just
yeah,
think, what a high accolade.
yeah. You did it, Ted.
You did it. We need we need an air horn or something.
Yeah. Later on, they was having some back and forth with some people because, as you might expect, this tweet provoked some blowback among conservatives. And he made a tweet. He quote tweeted Jenna Ellis. He said, "Jenna, not sure why you're defending this barbaric Ugandan law. It imposes life imprisonment for consenting adults who engage in gay sex. That's ridiculous. You or I may not agree with their choices, but consenting adults should not go to jail for what they do in their own bedrooms." So there you
Let
go,
me
Ted Cruz.
let me read a passage. Maybe we should not necessarily we won't necessarily, I suppose, go into the particular of whether or not the capital punishment for homosexuality is say a the necessary implication here, but we want to just two. I want to read something and just make a fast note. We had said in Romans 1. We all know what example that Paul used in talking about the unrighteousness and ungodliness and even idolatry of man, and what supreme example, at least he uses here, of how God gave them up to their passions. Okay, he's clearly speaking of homosexuality. He goes on and he speaks about it in verses 28 to the first half of 30. Sorry, to 30. Pardon me, I can't speak tonight. Verses 28 to 31. He lists other gross sins, just kind of really hitting everything as a whole, from unrighteousness to gossip to slandering and ventures of evil, disobedience to parents, and even disobedience to parents. He says in verse 32, though they, the ungodly and unrighteous as a whole, which is really everyone without Christ, though they know God's righteous degree, that those who practice such things deserve to die. So there is that. There is
Yep.
Paul stating a deserving to die. Now, is this this physical or spiritual death? But this is in the least stating, yes, everyone that practices all these things, from disobedience to parents, to gossip, all the way to homosexual acts, deserve to die. It's
Yeah.
physical and spiritual, but we do take note of. I mean, we do have to ask the question, though. I was going to say the follow up really fast, and actually get your thought on it too. Is uh, this doesn't speak about the manner in which that physical death is comes, and we're speaking about here it is a legitimate law that was not just put forward by the government, but also, from what I've been reading, endorsed by the citizenry at large in Uganda.
Yeah.
That this is the law. Now, when we know certain groups, the Two Kingdoms groups and whatever, let's just say it, when they say, hey, abide by the law. If you want to see change or whatever, then do it individually or in the civil sense. Well, here you have a civil government that's saying, this is the law of the land now.
Mm-hmm.
A death for what they say as a sin and unnatural act.
Yep. So consistency would demand, okay, this is the law of the land. This is what we have to roll with. Um, but another point, because I'm not a theonomist. I've been accused of being a theonomist a lot this week because I had that discussion I had about Meredith Klein. But I'm not a theonomist.
See our episode on theonomy.
So I don't, yeah, which the theonomists didn't like. So they're not cool with me
That's
either.
okay.
to anybody who's wondering.
I think we do have those.
Oh, I mean, we get along,
disagreements.
but they don't agree with me on these kind of issues. But I mean,
okay.
it is not insignificant that in the legal system that God provided for the body politic of Israel in the Old Testament, the punishment for homosexual activity was death. So if you're going to charge that the death penalty for homosexuality is unjust, that would mean you were charging God with injustice. And that's a problem. So, am I going to say we have to do this? No. But would it be unjust to do this? No, it wouldn't.
Right. That's actually, I think that's a really great way to put that distinction in there. It's not something that necessarily has to be pushed for in our perspective as a whole, and yet it isn't something that is, say, contrary to requirements in God's law. But I was going to ask also a thought here too, and this is another thing with America's kind of constant felt need or desire or whatever to get itself involved with the affairs of every single country. Uganda has made their own law, and Biden and others, even others in the UN, it's not just America, are calling this a human rights violation. And I mean, and the president of Uganda, made a great point in saying, well, we do not see this as a basic human right.
Yeah.
This is not something that is of nature. And we even spoke of, again, Paul saying that these acts are contrary to nature.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another thing, too, is anytime you hear this talk of human rights, of universal and basic human rights, basically, if you want to affirm that such a thing exists, I said this on Twitter. I was reacting to something, I don't remember what, but it was pertaining, I think, to this Uganda law. If universal human rights exist, they either have to be grounded in one of two things. They are given by God, and thus they are subject to the moral law. They're subject to God's absolute moral revelation, which homosexuality is not a part of that. It is something prohibited in God's moral revelation. Or if they're not rooted in God and they're not rooted in his creation, then they are simply a function of social contract. They're simply a function of what people and governments determine for themselves. And so then, if Uganda self-determines that this is not a basic human right, that has to be honored, that has to be respected. Either way, there's no logically consistent or theologically consistent or in any way consistent argument to make for universal human rights that would make homosexuality a universal and basic human right.
And to that very point, you think of you could think of Paul in Athens, on Mars Hill. He states, that God made. He says, God does not live in a temple made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God. So this is the statement: in him we live and move and have our being. So I mean, even the way that Paul speaks of it, and Scripture as a whole speaks of these things as not rights for man, but mercies of God, a gift from God. So life is not a basic right per se. In a civil sense, we do want to protect. We do want to generally protect the integrity of a life.
But we do that recognizing that God is sovereign over life, not us.
Right, and it's that he puts the sword in the hand of the government, of the magistrates, to punish evil.
Mm-hmm. Which the very fact that it's a sword tells you the extent to which it can and often needs to go.
Right, and it's a punishment for particular evils in the curbing of wickedness, so that it would not run rampant in society, that there would be order and some semblance of justice of which God is overseeing. So I mean, it's a promotion of things that are, in a broad sense, uh, good. But this meaning, though, God is the giver of life, movement, and sustainer. Um, it's in and so he entrusts, at least to the civil magistrate, their duties. In this
Yep.
sense, yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say, against Uganda, yeah, who says you can do this?
Right.
And others on the just a fast note on the flip side, where you have people say, yeah, uh, if Nero or someone puts if Nero makes the murder of Christians legal, then we should abide by Nero's law. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Not that anybody's ever done that.
oh,
Anyway,
anyways,
we've beat
that's not
up
our main
on
topic.
although we've done that topic before, so
Yeah,
you can go back and listen to that.
that
We
too.
beat up on poor Ted enough, but there's been more ostensibly conservative figures that have also compromised on this. There's another interesting one. Philip Klein is an editor of National Review, NRO. National Review, the publication of the American conservative thinker William F. Buckley Jr., but has now these days been known for sliding ever more cozy and comfortable towards the left. That's, for instance, where David French got his big start, and others that have followed a similar trajectory. But so Philip Klein, editor of National Review, and if you're watching on the video, this is where you get to see the Coles onesies and things of that sort. But he quote tweeted someone who was tweeting these pictures of the onesies, and he says, "I don't have a problem with this. If someone wants to dress their baby in a pride onesie, why should it matter? We're not talking about transitioning minors here. It's just a shirt." Again, editor of a major conservative, ostensibly, publication. I actually interacted with this tweet some. I replied that, well, yes, this is transitioning kids, because the process of transitioning starts by introducing them to the thing, saying that it exists and that it's benign, that it's acceptable enough that you can just wear it on a t-shirt. Because once you do that, I mean, I can't flesh out all this much in the tweet because it's a tweet, but once you start doing that, you start normalizing it in their minds and making them think, even from a young age, oh, this is a thing and it's around and it's okay. Um, you know, the road to transition has to start somewhere.
Let's just remind the slippery slope warning, some 15 years ago here in the United States,
Yeah.
when we were first presented with a bill to legalize gay marriage and stuff. Um, the left were critiquing conservatives and whatever, about saying, we don't have any agenda. It's you guys are worried that if you legalize homosexuality, it's only going to be a matter of time before pushing transgenderism on people, or incest, bestiality, whatever. That's not going to happen. We just want to have the same basic rights as everyone else. Like tax laws and stuff. Uh, I know we brought it up on
Hospital
the show again.
visits.
Yeah,
That was a big one.
it's ever the slippery slope. I mean, I can't remember if we've talked about it before, where you already have people advocating incest and pedophilia. What is it? My minority attracted peoples. I forget what they're calling pedophiles now, but
Yeah.
anyways, just a little note on there. It's just normalization of
Yep.
sin.
So, who else we got?
We have someone that was a former president.
Oh, yeah. because you might have heard us picking on poor Ted, and you're thinking, well, it's okay because Trump won, but then Donald Trump. Don't know if he's doing it this time around, but in the past, in his previous campaigns, he had LGBT themed campaign merchandise with the rainbows and all that stuff on it. Trump has done a lot to court a particular voter segment that is homosexual or other things, but ostensibly conservative. So yeah, Donald Trump, same issue. Uh, well, it's okay because now Ron DeSantis is running, right? Well, we have a video for you.
This is awkward.
If technology permits it.
That everyone's running around, DeSantis hates gays, blah, blah. I happen to be gay. I am married to a dude, okay? We're having kids. You know what showed up at my door 2 days ago? A package with we're having two babies, with two baby onesies from Ron DeSantis and his wife, okay? He does not hate gay people. At this PragerU event that I mentioned before, I said, Governor, this is my husband, David. Big hug, smile, took a picture, congratulations on the kid. This has nothing to do with an assault on gay rights. If DeSantis was saying gay people can't get married, gay people can't work, whatever the litany of stupidity that these people think, of course I would be against it. There's nothing I stand for.
Okay. So who was that?
Yeah, who was that?
That was Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is a conservative, ostensibly pundit, who has a show on The Blaze, which is an ostensibly conservative media platform. And I'm not saying everybody on The Blaze is bad or compromised or whatever, but it does really make you wonder. So, Dave Rubin is a homosexual. He is married to a man, and they have now had a couple of children via surrogacy, which surrogacy is its own other house of horrors that maybe we get into another time. In his gay marriage, and they now have these children, and apparently Ron DeSantis and his wife sent him a congratulatory gift. And when you do stuff like that, it is a certain tacit endorsement of the thing that being in a gay marriage and he said having, but having children within that gay marriage is an acceptable thing. So if you think that, well, you voting for Ron DeSantis will save you from this, you might also be a little disappointed.
And just a fast so this was the one that I did not know, and I had quite a lot of trouble when Andrew put it out on the show notes. I had a lot of trouble finding the anything about this at all. I mean, there's basically like no news articles whatsoever, as much as I sifted and searched.
Yeah, the video is actually a few months old. That's part of the issue. It's resurfaced now with DeSantis now declaring his candidacy for president, and Rubin is still very much promoting DeSantis, and DeSantis still has demonstrated that he likes being promoted by Rubin. So that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, it's that was a shock. That was a shocker. I mean, that was the one that I have absolutely no clue here, and it's just foreshadowing something we'll bring up in a little bit. This can tie in a little bit of, okay, well, what, maybe he's just being nice to the person. Maybe he's just being nice to Rubin. It's a courtesy, give them onesies. Hate the sin, not the sinner, or whatever. We'll come back to that with certain Christian sentiments in a little bit here. But speaking of speaking of big figures, now not as perhaps large as president candidates or even former presidents, but now, what about Daily Wire? What do we have for Daily Wire?
Because we already threw the Blaze under the bus. Is this supposed to be conservative platform? So you think I'm going to cancel the Blaze and I'm going to go sign up for Daily Wire? Well, here we have Jeremy Boring, the CEO of Daily Wire. He styles himself as the God King of Daily Wire, which is super obnoxious and also blasphemous. But so there's this tweet, and it involves The Chosen, which is another house of horrors we could get into another time. We keep doing that, but
I'm saying that because there's
we
only so much time.
yeah. We don't like The Chosen. It's bad. You shouldn't watch it. We haven't watched it, and we still think it's bad. And maybe we'll go into that another time.
I have a note after what you say here about boring. I have a fast note because it relates to it.
Yeah. So Jeremy Boring, CEO of the Daily Wire, throws his own writer under the bus, who pointed out that somebody on the set of The Chosen, this ostensibly Christian show, even though it's a Mormon show and it's a giant Second Commandment violation, that no one should watch. Did we mention no one should watch it? But there was a pride flag there, and one of the Daily Wire's reporters reported on it, and Jeremy Boring threw him under the bus, said, "This is a disgusting piece, and I'm sorry we ran it." And then he goes on to say, "A show like The Chosen has 100+ employees. One of them brought a pride flag to work. That sucks, but it's hardly the fault of the show." He goes on to add some other things as well, but you get the gist.
And just a fast note there with this, the Chosen's actual Twitter account, because at first there was kind of a question of like, all right, well, no one knows who brought it on the set. And they actually just, they were just bringing it on there, so it's not an actual direct endorsement, but they never really said anything about it. Well, the Chosen's Twitter account did make a statement saying, just like with our hundreds of cast and crew who have different beliefs or no belief at all, then we will work with anyone on our show who helps. So that's one thing just on The Chosen itself. But what was interesting, I thought, about the piece.
Did we mention no one should watch it?
Well, that's exactly it. The piece itself, I don't know if you got a chance to skim through it at all, but the piece that the Jeremy Boring is against, it actually included a denunciation of the show's Second Commandment violations and stating that it degraded the sufficiency of Scripture and that people should not be going to the show for what Scripture supplies and supplies better. So I'm just saying. So that's in addition to this whole thing. The article said also what has needed to be said for a long time in a larger media posting.
And then here's the CEO trashing it. By the way, in another reply, Jeremy Boring said that he was a Bible preacher. He himself was. So I'm not sure how much credibility I give that claim, but whatever.
So speaking of Bible, what about the church?
Yeah, actually, one last note on the Daily Wire, just to throw them a little further under the bus. So today there was a big dust up on Twitter regarding they plan to screen the What Is a Woman documentary for free on Twitter tonight. Which I think the documentary, it's actually, it's edgy, but I think it's actually generally worth people's time if they have the ability to see it. But anyway, so they raised a lot of trouble on Twitter today, did the Daily Wire, because Twitter initially decided they weren't going to allow the movie to be shown unedited, or they were going to throttle the traffic on it. And so the Daily Wire pushed back, and eventually Elon Musk himself found out about it, said no, they can show it. And I don't know if it went on or not. But so yeah, you have on one hand the Daily Wire sort of setting themselves up as this brand that is this, they're fighting the LGBT stuff, but you see there's clearly limits to their willingness to push back. And actually there are some homosexual employees and such at Daily Wire. One of them, I don't remember his name, but he is the husband in scare quotes, of Spencer Klavan, who is the son of Andrew Klavan, who's one of the Daily Wire's hosts. So, kind of have this web together of these sorts of things. So, again, you have mainstream conservatism, a lot of it, and even things like Blaze and Daily Wire that would seem a little more non-mainstream and a little edgier conservatism. and yet all still having varying degrees of compromise with these things. Okay, now we'll get to the church. Well, actually, maybe this will disappoint some of you, but we have a lot less stuff on the church. I guess it means at least there's less overt compromise and such going on in the church. But this is one
that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's only so much time in the day to comb for this stuff, but so here's one. The Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting is coming up very soon, and it's expected to be a very controversial and divided meeting. There's issues, particularly regarding the women's ordination issue with Rick Warren and things of the like. And so it's going to be a rather contentious event, the Southern Baptist annual meeting. But around the annual meeting, they have this Pastor Wives and Women's Conference. And one of the speakers is Rachel Gilson. Now, Rachel Gilson is a frequent contributor for the Gospel Coalition and other publications. Has been on there for quite a while, but she has some rather unorthodox views regarding homosexuality. She's been an advocate of Side B gay Christianity, and even things beyond that. And here she is, the headlining speaker at the Southern Baptist Convention's Pastors' Wives and Women's Conference. So you start to see these things, and they're creeping into the church as well.
And the nature of her work, if you want to call it that, and her writings are, she was a lesbian, and then I guess came out of that or whatever, got married, but now she goes in. She wanted to give better and more modern answers and help to people who profess Christianity and are LGBT, and like say she came across someone that is converted to being a Christian and is in a gay relationship, and she wanted to know, well, what do I do? Do I divorce or my partner or what? Because my partner's not a believer, or blah 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 blah. And basically her ultimate answer is no, stay married because God hates divorce. God is more interested in the marriage itself. Giving just a really tiny summary of it, putting it a little more simplistic than how she argues for it. But she says it's better in remaining in the marriage than in a gay marriage than divorcing.
Yeah. So, again, we're talking not orthodox views of marriage, of sexuality, and headlining the Southern Baptist Convention, which is supposed to be this arch-conservative evangelical denomination, and is the biggest denomination probably in the world now. It's certainly, I think it's at the very least the biggest Christian denomination in America. And headlining their women's conference. Now, also I mentioned she's associated with TGC, and TGC's had varying degrees of compromise with this for a long time. But they have another prominent figure, Rebecca McLaughlin, who's another one. She's a woman, claimed to be same-sex attracted, but is now married to a man. So it seems like it may be a fast track to success in that organization, is to have that kind of background. Actually, our friends on the Restless podcast, they just did a review of one of the good faith debates that Rebecca McLaughlin did regarding woke church. Their review, the debate itself is not so worthwhile, but Matt and Michael's review of it, I think, is worth your time, talking about woke issues more generally. So there, we got a plug in for you guys. Appreciate what you're doing. But anyway, so there's one example in the church. And then just as far as developments in the church more broadly, I mentioned the SBC's annual meeting is this month. It's going to be contentious, having a lot to do with issues of sexuality and the like. And then, of course, the PCA General Assembly is coming up again. And there's still the struggles and the issues the PCA is facing, and the continued fallout from Revoice. Greg Johnson and Memorial Presbyterian are gone now, but that doesn't mean that the influence or the issues surrounding it are. There's going to be several more overtures attempting to address that issue. It's been a difficult road for a lot of the overtures that the PCA has passed to actually get through the presbyteries and get enacted in the BCO. But we're going to have another round of that. And this is all going to happen during the month of June. During this month where the society and the culture is applying the most pressure, not just to the church, but to all of society, to embrace and to celebrate or to compromise on these things.
Yes. So I was writing some notes there for this next section here that we need to start moving a little bit towards the close here. So overall, there's this, this. What's concerning is when people put forward the myth of neutrality, whether a Christian, a politician, media, whatever. That we can simply, even though we have disagreements, on the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, whatever, we can generally play nice and get along. Perhaps if there was different conditions or a different history in our country, let me just say there's an element of where we might have been able to get along in this country with the left for a time, but as the big issue some 15 years ago with homosexuality started rising up, and then the wholesale endorsement to homosexuality and transgenderism since our Supreme Court passed the law for gay marriage, it's been a very, very, very fast dividing line. We can go into the various factors for which brought those out, but at another time. the matter is that let me actually put out this scripture verse. I'm actually preaching on this coming Lord's Day with the installation of new council members, deacons and elders. But in Joshua 24, I won't give you the whole sermon here. I'm just going to read 2 verses.
He's going to give you the whole sermon.
You wanted it to go an hour and a half, right? So
we're already at an hour and 13, so
we can make it. Joshua 24, verse 14. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. In those 2 verses, Joshua uses the word for serve 7 times. And already, whenever scripture repeats a single word in a short amount of time or in a passage, it wants you to pay attention. To repeat something 7 times, Joshua is telling the people, here's the line. Where are you going to stand? When the people keep going and insisting that that they'll serve the Lord, they'll serve the Lord, and Joshua gives them warning, saying, are you sure about that? But basically, Joshua then puts the challenge to them a second time, and he doesn't give them the option. He doesn't give them a choice of which side of the line to stand on. He tells the people flat out, you are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. Ultimately, the implication is none of us are going to be able to serve the Lord. None of us are going to choose which side of this dividing line without the Holy Spirit to guide us, without submission to Christ, without the grace of the Father. This is to say, even just taking out the political element, the socio-cultural elements here, aspects, which we easily can go into, the point is, there is a myth of neutrality on the basis of God's call upon us. upon Scripture. Choose you this day is, where are we going to bend the knee? Should we bend the knee to, or who are we going to bend the knee to? Where are we going to give our time, our thought, our money over? How do we use this life?
Where do we draw lines? Where do we make moral judgments to decide what is right and wrong, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable? I think what we've shown in providing all these various examples from these various places, and we did pay a particular emphasis. I mean, we could have shown stuff from the left, we could have shown stuff from the mainline churches, the usual suspects, and showing you all the wickedness and evil around them. But we paid a particular emphasis on a lot of the places where people do turn, and a lot of the places they might even expect to be sound and reliable, and to have made these decisions rightly, are in fact trying to walk the fence. They're trying to be neutral. They're trying to draw the lines in places where God has not done so. And if you think you're neutral, you're actually compromised. You're probably either on your way to the wrong side.
This is just the matter of, like, yeah, we're not just a cultural commentary podcast. We're not preachers of culture in the pulpit.
Right.
This is the matter, right? We talk about these cultural examples, yes, for information. This isn't us telling you, hey, go and boycott Chick-fil-A. That's the answer. Like that's not necessarily what we're doing here. Frankly, I could care less who you're boycotting,
right,
or whatever. Our interest, if not to speak for Andrew, but our interest, I believe, is simply, the Lord is the Lord, the King of Kings. God is God, and no politician's going to save us.
Right. But also, too, we need to look at these things and think about them as Christians, and how are we going to live faithfully? How are we going to love and serve God and our neighbor in a world that is like this? Because we look at these issues.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, we look at these issues. We look at the LGBT movement. We look at the LGBT group of sins, and they're not just things. This has been the lie we've seen over and over and over again. I mean, it was back in that Ted Cruz tweet. Whatever consenting adults do by themselves in their bedrooms, whatever, is nobody else's business. Nobody should care. But if we look at the Bible and how it talks about these kinds of things, they're not just radically individualized acts that affect individuals. They're corrupting to society. We read in Romans 1, we see it, not just in the Old Testament, although we're going to talk about the Old Testament, but we see it in the New Testament too, how this broader problem of suppression of the truth and unrighteousness, this failing to glorify God and give him thanks, produces these kinds of things. And these kinds of things, these sins, they're corrupting to the whole society. They are corrupting to the whole culture. And they call down the wrath of God upon nations and cities. I know it's very unpopular now to have any kind of discussion to say that God still deals in nations, works in nations. I mentioned I've been doing some stuff about Meredith Kline, and one of the ideas that he's really helped to push is that God no longer deals with nations in any meaningful way with his intrusion ethics and the like. But I really don't think biblically you can get away from this idea of God dealing with nations. I mean, you could say, well, there's no nation like Israel that's a particular theocratic nation. Okay, fine, but God dealt with the Gentile nations too, and he would judge them and he would punish them for their sins. See, where I'm going to be preaching the next few weeks, and I didn't plan this, but I'm going to be in Genesis 18 and 19, looking at Sodom and Gomorrah. And you see very much that their sins, their sodomy, hence the name, their overt and open, and dare we say prideful practice of homosexuality called down the wrath of God to destroy their cities. And as we we talked about earlier, it wasn't that God was unjust to do this. It wasn't that they didn't deserve it. And we can look at our nation and we can see a lot of the same things, and we ought to be at least a little, and maybe more than a little, nervous about when we look at things in Scripture, the things that look most like our nation and our society and the things in which we live. And also, we could say, well, it's okay because we have lots of Christians, we have our Christian community, but you could even look, I'm talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. A very similar thing happened in the people of God. In the book of Judges 19 and 20, the tribe of the Benjaminites, they were supposed to be part of God's people, and they basically remade Sodom and Gomorrah in the visible people of God, and they underwent a similar punishment and destruction. They were almost completely wiped out in war because of it. Another issue that we need to think about, because this comes up a lot as we deal with these things, is a lot of people, because these is our culture's pervasive sins, and it's connected to the power and the influence and remaining regarded as a good person in society, there's attempts to try to softball the issue. There's attempts to equivocate, to say things like, well, yeah, homosexuality is bad, but I mean, so is all our other sins, our lust, our covetousness, our greed, our things of that sort. And that's not biblical thinking. That's not Reformed thinking. Question 83 of the Westminster Shorter Catechism, it asks, are all sins in themselves equally heinous? The answer is no. Some sins in themselves, by the nature of what they are, and then by means of several aggravations, are more heinous in the sight of God than others. And homosexuality is an aggravated sin because it is a sin against nature, is a sin against the created order. You can look at the larger catechism, questions 150 and 151. They flesh out what those several aggravations and things of the like are, and one of them is sins against nature are particularly egregious. It's not okay to equivocate and softball these sins away just because the world likes them, and the world will like you more if you do that.
Well, because you mentioned the Westminster, you know that I have to now add with the Heidelberg, which is fairly similar in this. Lord's Day 41, question answer 108 and 109. What does the seventh commandment teach us? Well, that all unchastity is accursed of God, and that we must therefore detest it from the heart and live a chaste and continent life, both within and outside of holy wedlock. In 109, does God in this commandment forbid nothing more than adultery and such like gross sins? Well, since our body and soul are both temples of the Holy Spirit, it is his will that we keep both pure and holy. Wherefore he forbids all unchaste actions, gestures, words, thoughts, desires, and whatever may entice, or in other translations you say incite, one thereto. So I like if you look at the scripture citations that the Heidelberg uses here in question answer 108, it talks about all unchastity is accursed of God. It cites Leviticus 18:28. I'm not going to read you all the citations it gives, but just a couple note here. Leviticus 18:28, and then actually others will say 30. Lest the land vomit you out when you make it unclean, as it vomited out the nation that was before you. And remember, this is the Heidelberg making its references here. But so this is New Testament Christianity. This is Reformed Christianity. Keep my charge never to practice any of these abominable customs that were practiced before you, and never to make yourselves unclean by them, those abominable practices. And chapter 18 of Leviticus is particularly on sexual immorality. A couple chapters later in the Holiness Code, which explicates more of these, the maintaining a life that is consecrated to the Lord. So in other words, obedience and gratitude. That's where chapter 20 talks about chapter 20 is what gives the uh, indictments against homosexuality as a whole. And it puts it in the same league as all other kinds of sin, of lust, calling them complete like perversions. Um, so there's an element where, yes, like lust is in a sense a broader category of sins, but homosexuality does end up taking a pretty heightened place of a core example of what is gross to the Lord, again from Romans 1. Uh, Likewise, the Catechism cites 1 Corinthians 6:18 and 19. 1 Corinthians 6:18 and 19 is what reads, flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body. But listen to this. So he cites all other sins are those which is committed outside the body ultimately in their effects, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? In other words, just that we are supposed to be consecrated to the Lord. Uh, and the reason Paul gives is that you are not your own. Now, he's speaking particularly to those redeemed in Christ in this instance, but nonetheless, what is true is that we are, and what Paul talks about in Romans 1, is that we all ultimately have belonged to the Lord as creatures, and we do not honor him as his creatures. We do not honor the Creator or even thank him. We act in unrighteousness and ungodliness. But what we have here with sin, pardon me, what we have here with Pride Month is, think on that name, Pride Month, in connection to LGBT. It is unabashed celebration of sin. And what was it that the Heidelberg Catechism said? It's not just adultery and just in general the gross sins, but it says God forbids all unchaste actions. All unchaste actions. And this includes whatever may entice someone to sin. The Pride Month is is a celebration of sexual immorality, and it perpetuates that sin among LGBT people, and it incites its endorsement in society, and such as what is particularly done with those babies, with those baby onesies.
Yeah. Or even if you just ever see any of the events or anything tied to this, you ever go to and you shouldn't, unless you're maybe going to evangelize or something and you've got pretty thick skin. Um, if you go to one of these pride events or even just see the pictures of them or whatever, that's what you see too. It's this celebration, but it's also incitement. Or why has there been all these efforts to target the public schools with, these books that are, graphic and pornographic, and encouraging children towards LGBT and all that? There's very much a culture of incitement within the LGBT movement as we see it in this culture.
My one of my nephews, he was 10 years old just a couple months ago. He was before at a private Roman Catholic school, um, and for whatever matters, for certain matters, him and his brother had to transfer, and they ended up in a public school. And within just 1 or 2 days, he met, within at least that first week, he met another 9-year-old whatever, or sorry, 10-year-old boy that wears dresses and thinks he's a girl. So that was his day one in transferring in, and he was just kind of like, what? Like it's being normalized to such an extent you can't run away from it.
Yeah. But because it's so normalized, there's such extreme pressure to compromise, and we see this compromise all over. We've looked at a lot of cases of it. And this is the difficulty for Christians, and it's something that can be very hard to navigate, and it's even getting more and more costly to navigate. Because at the end of the day, if you want to be a Christian and if you want to be faithful to God's word, there is no acceptable threshold of how much of this stuff you can be okay with. Like, you see varying degrees. Like some say LGB without the T, because there's been a lot of pushback against transgenderism, and you even have like, the group Gays Against Groomers. They're homosexuals, but they're against these efforts that target children, and a lot
So
of
moral.
a lot of conservatives and even Christians, they like these things and try to ally with them and befriend them. But at the end of the day, it's like it's really an all or nothing proposition. Again, this neutrality is a myth. You're either in it or you're out. Um, you either believe in God's moral law and you believe in his created order, you believe in his design for male and female and marriage and sexuality, and all of it comes together, and it is all a package deal, and you can't clip some parts out of it and just keep the parts you want, or you don't. It's really that simple. It's not fun, especially in a world where this is the pervasive sins of the culture and the things they really want to promote and push. But that's the situation. You either believe that or you don't. And we're also facing a situation. I mean, in the past, at least for the sake of like evangelism and just general human civility and stuff, how do you treat your coworkers? If you have friends that are this way. But increasingly, LGBT people, they will not accept anything from others less than absolute acceptance and celebration. And this makes evangelism and attempts at bridge building, attempts to reach them with the gospel, or even just attempts to like have normal human interactions, it just makes it all the more difficult. In a lot of ways, they hate Christians, and they're conditioned to hate Christians, at least of the biblical kind, because everything in their movement is pressing them to. Caleb mentioned earlier the Trevor Project and their work, which is essentially anti-Christian propaganda in the interest of transing the kids. They started from an early age to not only be this thing, but to know that Christians are the bad people and you can't even be around them and talk to them. And so this is a difficulty that we have to face as Christians living in this world, and especially during Pride Month, as this is going to be forced upon us from every turn. We do care about evangelism, but we also need to avoid compromising ourselves, and it's getting ever harder to do. And we need to protect ourselves and those around us and our churches from corrupting influence. Because so much of this movement has been subsumed in activism, and it really has become a religion in its own right that needs to proselytize and needs to get converts and needs to bring other people in. It's not just we're Christians and then we're after these people that they're just confused or deceived or whatever. No, they are their own religion, and this basically is a clash between two religions, two fundamentally different worldviews. And again, there can't be neutrality. You're one or you're the other.
There's yeah, I mean, in fact, I mean, I omitted a large, I omitted quite a bit of articles, believe it or not, that I wanted to appeal to, for time.
Oh yeah, I did too.
Statement.
Yeah.
One of the big themes, actually, from a couple of them that I pulled, was that the left, these let's just call it these secularists, these humanists, are very aware that there is no neutrality, and they look at these boycotts and they're saying, well, these are good things. We ultimately want these these conservative and orthodox blah 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 and these evangelicals to to not touch these places, to not touch these these corporations and societies. We want them to be basically, we want them to be separated. We want them to be institutionalized. We want these to be ours. They're saying, yeah, it's better that that they're getting that they don't touch this stuff and let us just, let us have them. It's the same thing that you would see happen oftentimes, more often than not, with liberal denominations or liberal congregations. The liberal party in a denomination uh, doesn't typically leave. They fight and they fight and fight until they can, through through tricky political maneuvering, normally they will push out the conservatives. They'll punish and depose, whatever they can. They try to get the majority, um, and use very backhanded tactics to get the strong conservative voices out, and then frustrate the rest so that they leave. I mean, this is largely what happened with the PCUS and with J. Gresham Machen. But
PCUSA.
At the time, it was PCUS, I think, wasn't it?
Nope.
It was already
PCUS was the
PCUSA.
Southern.
Okay.
Yep.
It was
The
already merged.
PCUS was where the PCA came out of.
It
Because
was already merged.
yeah.
But but you understand what I'm saying there. And it's the same thing that generally happened with the CRC too, and they were giving formation to the URC. But the point being, the left secularists are very aware of what they're doing, and they're already calling for, in response to these boycotting by conservatives, they're already calling for, well, obviously our old methods of organizing ourselves aren't working. We need a new way to organize and to counter and shut out the conservatives. I mean, this is, like, I was seeing this kind of stuff like everywhere on major news media outlets. Major news media outlets. I want to put a question out, and then I'll bow out of my end here, but and see if there's anything you want to follow up on. But uh, all of this puts a real serious question to all of us. I'd already said, for me, I don't necessarily care if you boycott, if you choose to boycott something like this, like Target or not. I mean, that's nice. I myself am not endorsing Target. I'm spared quite a lot of things like Chick-fil-A. I've never been a fan, but
They aren't even in this part of the country.
no, they are they are in Sioux Falls.
Oh, well.
I already have the moral high ground there. I've always hated Chick-fil-A. I'm kidding. The It's hard to boycott everything, is why I say that. I don't necessarily care if someone boycotts or not. I think it has to be a conscious decision, and not going with the flow. But it's hard to boycott everything. And already, like, say you want to, if you want to, stay away from Apple and Apple products, where do you go? What other OS are you going to use? Microsoft. Well, great. They're already endorsing all this stuff too. What about Android phones? Cool. How much of Android actually runs on Google stuff? Like,
Yeah.
it's
all of
it.
it.
That's no better. Do we get rid of our phones? Sure, that's fine. I'm totally fine with going back to flip phones. There's actually some pretty cool ones nowadays. And Gen Z seems to really like them. But so where are there certain lines? And for me, Amazon. Okay, Amazon we all know, is a super convenient thing, right? Being able to just go and click, and you have your the shipping fees generally waived for Prime members, whatever. You can browse things and find stuff that you don't always find in stores, or they didn't have good prices. Here's my point with that. I would love to personally cut all of that. And it's a serious question. But what I'm more interested in is, can we ourselves also go in, provide these kind of alternatives?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many times I go on the internet looking for a Christian-owned, or even simply just a conservative Amazon alternative, and there's nothing that's really that really kind of has that kind of scope.
Yeah. Or I mean, if
Um,
it is, it's very narrow. Like, so
right.
Amazon, you're gonna buy your books off Amazon. Well, if you're buying, reform books, you can go buy them from RHB
Publishers,
or WTS
if
books
they have
or
them.
CBD or anything. You've got options there.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
like other books, it gets more difficult. And also, you find a lot of these like other off-brand sellers. Well, they're actually owned by the same big companies. Like
Yep.
Abe Books is owned by Amazon, so
Yep.
if you're
So
going to
there's
Abe
that.
Books and trying to avoid Amazon, sorry. I say this, I've actually divested just about all of my business from Amazon and have found alternatives for most things. Um,
It takes
but it's
some
not,
finagling.
yeah, it
Like,
takes some work, it takes some
well,
effort, and
case in point with like, I mean, Target, right?
yeah,
We easily go and boycott Target, but then people will go over to Walmart and still get stuff at Walmart that endorses the same stuff.
yeah.
The
I I
uh
think it's more of an issue of like being strategic and if there's a boycott that's if somebody's doing something that's like really public and loud and
mhm.
egregious, yeah, we can band together and we can make them pay for that, and it sends a message to others that maybe you want to think twice before you do this.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's not even hey, make you pay. It's I want my money to go somewhere else if that's the case. I don't want to
Yeah.
fund you. But my question though, my actual question being put forward is, where's the Christian organization? Um,
Mhm.
I don't care if the liberals get these businesses. If they want them, take them, go for it. If you want the name recognition, go for it. You want the capital, fine. But um, even when you get to something like the Republican Party, uh, again, the Republican Party and this bipartisan party we have in the U.S. as a whole, they're pandering. They pander. We know that, yeah, it ends up always becoming lesser of the two evils, or this guy is going to be closer to my alignment, but it's to my values. But again, yeah, you do you go and we all knew Trump was a terrible person. And it's like, okay, but at least he's going to be able to get some stuff done. Well, great.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'm
the
probably like 98% sure that one of the guys we were ribbing earlier in the show, I'm going to end up voting for in the end.
exactly. But it ultimately does still beg the question of even if we can't have a Christian political party of sorts or whatever, we know the difficulty of third parties getting any kind of platform in our country. But where are there elements of lobbying, or how can Christians become involved in these things, at least? Uh, in other words, there does have to be, in my thinking, we just we're good neo Calvinists. We're Kuyperians. We're not theonomists or theocrats. We think that Christians should have institutions. If you watch TV, um, how wonderful it is to be able to be spared of things like Netflix or whatever. If there was something better than PureFlix or whatever, if we had something that was at least offered something that's even just more sanitized and not as crappy production or or cheesy.
Mhm.
Why can't we have things like I for one am very happy for Christian baseball leagues. I'll say that Christian baseball softball leagues. You just talked about Little League and what's going on
Mhm.
with that. Well,
Can
I don't
churches
want
band together
yeah,
and start their own youth sports leagues that
and
operate
they
according
already
to their
exist.
values? Yeah.
uh, and even then, we know what happened with the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. Well, I mean, here in the Reformed end, in the Continental Reformed, we have the Calvinist cadets and we have gems. It's so we've always had those alternatives that still stand strong. There's benefits to elements of institutionalizing, though, is what I'm
Mhm.
stating here. Can
Yeah.
we become more creative in utilizing the money that we're already spending towards Target, in putting towards investment in a Christian organization? that might be a business organization that can rival, or not rival, but provide the alternative for something like Amazon.
Yeah. And I think we need to have that institution building ethos because, sorry to say, I know there's been a lot of doom and gloom on this stream already, but as far as this culture and this country, I don't think things are going to get a lot better for Christians real quickly. And part of getting by in a hostile world, in a hostile culture, is we have to be able to build our own institutions. We have to provide people with jobs. We have to provide people to a means to make a living. We have to be able to, and yeah, I mean the kind of the culture and the the art and the things that we want to have, the things that make life enjoyable. If we're going to have them, and they're not going to be captured and they're not going to be corrupted by all these worldly and sinful influences, we've got to get creative and we have to have our own. One of
Which
my
includes legal protection too. We
yeah
understand already with the nature of businesses. You can be a Christian business owner, you can own a Christian bakery, and they're still going to come after you.
Yeah. Or even like the professions themselves, because things like bar associations and medical associations and all of that have been heavily captured. You need things maybe even like new credentialing bodies and
ATS.
credentialing systems. Yeah, the ATS accreditation. We want to do some stuff on that probably sooner rather than later because I think it's a really important discussion. Accreditation bodies of higher education. Never mind the institutions of higher education themselves. Uh, One of my favorite, not to keep going back to political things, but one of my favorite political commentators right now, he's a guy named Oron McIntyre, and he's on the Blaze, so there you go. I'm not completely, you know, shutting it down. But and he's a Christian. He's some kind of Baptist, I believe. But he does a lot of, I think, helpful reflection on things of this sort. And something he says is, we look a lot about like going back to what came before, as far as the glories of the past when we had a largely Christian culture and civilization, and people are always looking to go back to that and recapture that. And probably a more helpful way to look at where we stand now as Christians in America in 2023 is ours is a conquered culture and we are insurgent. We are basically looking to, we're basically up against and revolting against the prevailing culture and building things anew. Because so much of what we had before, even though we did have it once, it's lost and we're not getting it back. So,
I think
I
it's
think,
I think
yeah.
well, it's a it's a I think that's easy. It's easy to complain. It's easy to to point out the frustrating things. We all see them, likely we're at least all aware of them, even if we don't always know how to articulate all this stuff that's bothering us in this culture or whatever. It's easy to complain, but the hard part, and this is why I mean when I'm saying oh hey OFAD guys, well you just want do you just want your cake and to eat it too? Like you talk about all these various people, and you want to shouldn't you go and boycott them or do something about them? It's at least on my end, I think it's harder to get creative. It's harder to start trying to seek alternatives, in particular answers, and asking ourselves, well, what is the cost if we don't start looking forward? If we're only stuck looking at what we once had, kind of like what Andrew's saying here from the Blaze. Yeah, those are great things, and we can take certain great inspirations from them. But we also need to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
And who are we rebuilding for? It's not necessarily just ourselves. We may not see fruits for a long time. It may not be until our kids or children's children. But point being, there's we should be aware of what's happening, take it in our cultures and society, Remember, we know that Pride Month isn't just something in the U.S. It's global.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to really get thinking and have think tanks in generating how to basically sustain ourselves in a sense.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, I just don't think have done that kind of thinking. A lot of people either try to avoid the discussion. We've talked about, not to keep beating a dead horse, but we've talked about, forms of two kingdoms thinking that just basically don't want to play ball on any of this stuff. Sorry to say. Or there's others that, yeah, they build their whole ideology and vision of cultural engagement around, yeah, we'll just go back to where we were before, and we're not going back to where we were before. One of my critiques of like Stephen Wolfe and his case for Christian nationalism, I think he's got some good points. He's done a lot of sourcing and reformed history and stuff, but at the end of the day, like, it's not the 17th century anymore. I think it's too idealistic. We have no clear path to get there. So what do we do with what we have? Well, what do we do with what God has given us and where He has placed us that we can actually make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for future generations, and it will glorify God, see the gospel go forth, and be salt and light in this world.
Yeah, and we're not going to tell you today or something.
I suppose we've kind of hinted strongly at it all throughout.
We're almost at 2 hours, so it's like
yeah, I believe this is our longest show yet. After I said we kind of need to keep it short because I got stuff in the morning, but so we'll go ahead and wrap up there. Thank you for joining us on Once for All Delivered on this very long show about pride and the myth of neutrality. As always, if you like what you've heard, subscribe, share. Subscribe on YouTube. Like, if you're listening on the podcast, I notice most of our traffic is still there. We are doing these shows live. Maybe you catch one. You can chat, get involved, make it a little more interactive. But we are on social media too at OF80 Podcast. You can consider supporting us, becoming a paid subscriber. Go to our website, onceforalldelivered.com. Pledge a subscription.
In the least, with the subscriptions and such too. In the least, I believe. We can also view these videos on YouTube if you can't catch the live stream.
Yeah,
so
you still see them.
Our ugly mugs, or at least my ugly mug, but Andrew's handsome visage, whatever that means. I think it means face, but you can look at us and watch us repeating the same movements in this little, square frame.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's a thing. Yeah, we're doing video. We're working on it. We're gradually figuring it out a little more and having fewer hiccups and trying some new things. If you watch the video of this show, we had some slides, we had some video, so try to make it worth your while. And so, but also too, if you do support us with a subscription, it's to, we're not getting rich off of this. We're not even making money off this. Any of the money we get, we just goes back into the show to try to make it better, make it look better, make it sound better. Make it more interesting. So anyway, if you have questions for us, you can email us, of80podcast@gmail.com. Or hit us up on our social media feeds. And it's been real. It's been fun.
It's been real fun. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And should we try out our new closing tag?
We have a new closing tag.
Yeah, there was something of a recommendation, kind of
5 seconds.
Yeah, that we are the Inane Juvenile Discourse Podcast.
Oh,
Thank you for listening to this episode. For the latest news and updates, visit our Substack at onceforalldelivered.com, where you can also support our work with a paid subscription. You can also follow us on social media at OF80 Podcast. If you like what you have heard, leave a 5-star review where you get your podcasts, and spread the word about the show. Once for All Delivered is hosted by Andrew Smith and Caleb Castro, and produced by Andrew and Heidi Smith. A special thank you to our founding members, Eric and Kathy Hepker. We hope you will join us again next time on Once for All Delivered.